Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mugs and Hugs. I'm Jennifer Ozgur.
I'm Heidi Marlinghaus.
And
And
I'm Jim.
today,
Oh, I'm sorry.
go for it. Go for it.
I'm Jim Ewing.
And thank you, Jim. We all met at the Kids First conference. Yes.
Yes.
Right. And I have to say, you were just one of those super participants. You were a speaker, you were a champion, and such a supporter of this movement that we're trying to build. And what we do at Mugs and Hugs is have strength-based positive conversations around education. We thought you have just been so gracious and warm and thought it was a great fit. And we can't wait to just discover more of your personal passions, educational passions, professional passions around educations where you see it going. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank
you, Jim.
So go ahead, Heidi.
I was just going to say, Jim, if somebody were to look you up on the internet, what would they find?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that if you were to ask that question 5 years ago, you wouldn't find me. I had searched about 5 years ago, and I think I was on the 10th page. And now if you Google math ELLs with a space in between, then I believe I come up first or second in the Google search. And that just goes to show that I've been very busy, and also that that's my passion. I like math, but I'm actually passionate about ELLs, or as we'll be talking about, I prefer the term emergent bilinguals. And so if you do a search, that's what you find, a lot about math and emergent bilinguals.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And the way you said that, I think I'd like to take the questions out of order just a little bit. Not that there's a rule or anything, but the fact that in a very short span of time, you went from very little presence to high presence, high SEO is where people Google, what you specialize in, and boom, there you are. So I'm wondering, what do you contribute to that success, and what has been your happiest moment in Maths ELL?
Okay, can I tell you a story and answer that with a story?
We love stories.
Okay. I woke up in the middle of the night. Where am I? And then it dawned on me. I'm at my parents' house. That's right. And the problem is I'm not 7, I'm 47. I'm still sleeping in my old bed in my parents' house. I look over and see 2 tattered suitcases. And I'm reminded that all my possessions fit in those 2 suitcases. No wife, no money, and no job. That was 11 years ago. And so what I did have was a dream. See, I was a teacher in Spain, and my dream was to be an elementary mathematics education professor. And here I am right now talking to you, and I'm living my dream every day. I'm living my dream. And so I think that's been my drive, the fact that I didn't have a house, and I had to work for it. Got a house. I'm actually speaking from my house. We just got a house this summer, and my passion is helping students, and it's not work. I just that's all I do is for fun even is work on that and trying to make an impact in schools and the way we meet the needs of our students in math, but especially emergent bilinguals. And so that's been my trajectory. So another big moment. Do you want to ask another question, or should I go on?
Please go on.
Okay. Another big moment. You asked what I was proud of. Another big moment was when I met Eric Jensen. I just come back from Spain. I just finished my first year here. This is my 6th year as a professor. And I never really been to any workshops. And I saw Eric Jensen, and I said, wow. I was just so impressed about his passion, about his deliveries. And I said, wow, I want to be like Eric. And I just stalked Eric Jensen kind of, and I went to all his workshops. Once I got an email from him, and he said, "Would you like my job?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was going to retire, and he said he was looking for a small group of people to give professional developments. And so I knew that I didn't have the experience because he's got like 90,000 people on his email list, and a lot of people are going to be applying for these jobs. So I Googled and I found out, I like Google, by the way. So I Googled and I found out that Eric Jensen was going to present at ASCD, and I hopped on a plane and I talked to Eric in person. And I said, "Eric, I want you to consider me to be one of those you're going to train to be to give workshops for professional development." And I was chosen. I was one of the 8 chosen. And so that was a moment I was very proud of, because I really had to work for it.
So can you unpack that a little bit where, I once heard, I think it was Hal Elrod who said, people love these overnight success stories where they're just out of nowhere, but don't realize how long it takes to become an overnight success. So for those aspiring to follow in your footsteps, can you unpack like what actually did it take to go in that 11-year journey from waking up in the middle of the night, what am I doing, to Eric Jensen saying, "Oh, please, like I'm going to take you under my wing and pass that baton on to you"?
Okay. You said, I don't know about the success, right? I'm not there yet, but thank you for that. It's been hard work. I'm not going to say it's not fun work, but hard work. I've spent a lot of time, and I think just having that passion is made a big difference, and having that direction is really important as well. I'm not sure. You kind of caught me by surprise with that question, Jennifer, but I think that's it. Just the fact that, for example, when I worked on my dissertation, you have to have a very narrow niche, and my niche is very, very narrow. It's math, helping English language learners in math. And now I've made it even smaller, and it's particularly Hispanic or Spanish speaking, Latinx or Spanish speaking emergent bilinguals is the area that I'm interested in. So just having that passion and luck also, just, the fact that I happened to meet Eric Jensen, he took me under his wing, made a big difference as well.
Well, they say the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Okay, right. And I just remember I went to this training. So I went to this training, Eric Jensen's training, and there was 7 other of us there. And I asked one of them, so how many PDs have you given? And she was like totally surprised. You mean in a week, in a month, in a year? And I was actually thinking all together, because I'd done like 10, and I think she does about 250, 300 PDs a year. And so she was kind of startled by my question. And so the fact that I was with them just pushed me as well. It wasn't easy. It was intense. It was sink or swim, and I desperately tried to swim.
So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm on mute because I got people walking around. I'm really curious about this word that I keep hearing come up, Jim. You keep talking about work, and you're talking about hard work, and then you said very early on, you said your job isn't really work, it's just fun. And that's always very interesting to me, because I believe in my work should be my passion, right? And because passion is going to give me energy and it's going to drive me. Yet it still takes effort. And so when we're talking about work, we're talking about the amount of effort we put into it, versus like just that word work being a negative word. You know what I mean? Because so many people hate what they do.
Right.
And even if they love what they do, maybe the conditions are so bad that, like I know that for teachers, a lot of teachers love teaching, but the teaching conditions often are not good, especially now during COVID, right? Like some of these teachers are actually having to be in the classroom with COVID around, and they're not that comfortable with it. That's not very good conditions right there. So that makes going to your workplace feel like work versus energy out. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of clear that up, because for me that word work always kind of is like, well, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about passive energy, or are we talking about something that's just like, ugh? And so that makes me wonder, like, what are you most passionate about right now? What's driving your energy today? What's giving you that opportunity to work in a really positive way?
Speaking with you two, of course, right? I'm on vacation, and yet this is a perfect opportunity to spread the word and to talk to you. And I think that's an example of I could be out doing something else, and I'm here, and I'm smiling, and I'm having fun. And thank you for having me. But I'm also passionate about something right now. A project I have on is I'm writing my first children's book, and it should be coming out in a couple of weeks. And it's called Juan Jose, You Are Especial. And I actually add that word, and I put that in Spanish. And so that's what I'm passionate about now. And I've been working on it. For example, this morning and yesterday, I was working on that book also. And it should be coming out soon. And
I want to know more about this book. It sounds to me like almost like a social emotional learning book, where you're talking about feelings and acceptance and kind of understanding yourself. But I've also read, like fiction books that are read like a story, like a narrative, that are around math. So now I'm curious, do you have math in this, or is it straight up social emotional?
Right. No, actually, there isn't math, but it can be. So I'm actually doing this for teachers and for students, and then I'm going to make some math problems along that. And the reason why was I was starting with the math, and I realized that I went into the library at my university, and it's not just my university, but I asked the librarian there to give me 100 children's books. And so she did, and I took it into a math class. I said, okay, I passed them out, and they said, okay, let's do the math here. How many books here would represent, and there was a few Latinx students, would represent you? And she looked through it, and everyone looked at her. Not one out of 100 books had a Latinx character or any kind of Spanish. And here we are at a university, right? And so I looked around at schools, and the schools I was going at, I was seeing like 75, 80% of the students were Latinx, and yet none of the books were about them. So I said, okay, well, some books were in Spanish. So you take a white kid who's a story about Michael and an umbrella or something, and then you just translate it into Miguel or not. But really, it's that culture and the SEL that's missing as well. And so I was just overwhelmed and disappointed. And so I said, well, I'm going to make my own book. And I looked at my girlfriend identifies as Mexican. But her kids, like a lot of emergent bilinguals, were born here in the United States. And so her kids, for example, they follow the Mexican soccer team, but they also like the Dallas Cowboys. They eat enchiladas verdes at home, right? But they also like pepperoni pizza, And so I couldn't find any book that was cross-culture like that, because yes, there's books in Mexico. Yes, there's books in Guatemala, right, for the kid. But how about the kids that were born here that have this, that have this double cross-culture? I feel like there's nothing there. So most of the words are in English, but I'll say, for example, that Juan Jose likes speaking to his abuela on the phone. And so there's just a little bit in there, because typically we ignore the fact that some of our students speak another language, and it's just half that book. And so if we ignore half of the book, you know where I'm going with this, then you're ignoring half of the child, and we want to meet the whole child.
That's beautiful. And what I would like to clarify for some people who may not know, the term Latinx is relatively new. And if you could just explain that for people, and then if you could give us maybe another story about how your passion for this began, that journey with math and Latinx population.
Sure. Okay. So I've got a book behind me also. This is a math book. And so I actually use the term Hispanic here. This is one of my recent books, because otherwise no one would buy the book. If I put Latinx, you know, not this. They're using the term Hispanic in schools. They're using the term ELLs in schools, so that's the term that I've used. But Latinx is more respectful, and the term Latinx. For example, Hispanic comes from Hispanos, which comes from Spain, and so a lot of people living in Mexico and other countries around there resent being called Spanish. So that doesn't work. And Latinos can be sexist. For example, if you were talking about the three of us, since I'm a male, then it would be, you know, if the three of us were Latinx, we would say Latinos, even though there's two of you and one me. You would think, well, since there's two of you, we should use the feminine term, but it's not. And so that's why we use the term Latinx, to be respectful and inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Another question I forgot. My question, yes. The fact that I lived in Spain for half my life, and a lot of my friends here are Mexican American. And so I speak Spanish, and not only do I speak Spanish, I feel like I'm bicultural as well. Mm-hmm. In Thanksgiving, I'll be eating tacos tomorrow, for example, with my turkey.
So you also lightly touched upon, we really feel, Heidi and I, about the words that you use. They create meanings. Words create worlds. And both of us, we've been teaching now collectively. Well, I mean, if the three of us added up, how many years of experience teaching would be, I think, very awe-inspiring. And through all these years, how you refer to people who speak English as not their primary language. And that term has changed over time. So if you could speak to that a little bit and give us a little overview and reflect toward that, how you feel about it.
Sure. I told you a story. Can I tell you the same story and just pretend like about emergent bilinguals? You can just pretend like you're surprised. This is for your audience. I do this in my workshops, and the term English language learners is used so often, but if we stop and reflect, words do matter, as you say, Jen. So I don't like that term. I think it's an example of deficit language, because we're just focusing on the fact that we want our students to learn English. And I prefer the term emergent bilingual. So what we could do was, I think, Heidi, you're left-handed, right? So if we were to draw a picture in the air, right, of a house, right? So go ahead and draw a picture of a house, right? The roof, the windows, right? And so that was kind of fun, right? Wasn't it? And I've done this in workshops, and no one leaves like in the middle of it. And the point there is, it was fun because it was kind of exploratory, just like learning a language can be fun if it's done in an exploratory fashion. But that doesn't mean we have to forget the way we draw pictures with our right hand, does it? Really, our goal is to be ambidextrous, to use both hands. So just because we're drawing a picture with our opposite hand doesn't mean we have to forget about the other. And that's what we're doing with English language learners. We're just focusing on English. We've got this English only mindset. And when you have this English only mindset, then you think about, well, our identity, and our language is identity. Who says I love you? Often students hear that in their first language. And so it's not fair. It's not equitable to call someone an English language learner. And it's not respectful, because our students are multilingual or emergent bilinguals. And so when we use other terms like emergent bilinguals, then words do matter, and it affects through the SEL, right? Social emotional learning, if we're just focusing on that one language. And there's another writer that I like a lot. Her name is Geneva Gay, and she says it's an English only mindset. And like in Europe, I lived in Europe for a while, and there's like the more languages the better, and really respect. But I find that we have to be careful with stereotypes. But here in the States, often we just focus on English. And it's important to recognize and value people for speaking another language.
Yeah, as I was listening to you talk about, I totally lost it.
Emergent bilinguals?
No. Hold on, it'll come back to me.
While you're thinking about it, did you get it? If not, I have just a little
Go
question
ahead.
about you.
It'll come back to me.
Okay, so my husband is from Turkey. Ironically enough, I say Thanksgiving like every day's Turkey Day. Where and so yeah, like it was like ESL. Well, it's not just a second. Sometimes people speak multiple languages. I have a Pakistani student, and she has Urdu, Arabic. More this like English is like a fourth language. And so, an English language learner to me is, well, I teach English. We're all learning English. And so I'm wondering how you feel about, and I don't know if I've seen this or not, but NNS, non-native speaker. Now, do you think that still contributes to a hierarchy? Oh, well, you're non-native, or do you think that that word has some type of implicit bias to it? Because I think I've like seen that places.
Sure. I feel like it's deficit language, rather than recognizing, 4 languages. When I hear 4 languages, like, wow, that's just amazing. And non-native speaker just focus on the fact that they don't speak English.
Mm.
It's not recognizing, it's a lot of work. There goes your work again, Heidi. It's a lot of work to learn 4 languages. And we're just focusing on the negative, on the deficit, rather than the asset. 4 languages, wow. Wow. And then that ties into math, because typically our teachers or educators have lower expectations if they just focus on their English, because without noticing, they say, well, Jim's not very good at speaking English, so he's probably not good at math either. And so they have lower expectations. And we know that our students, often that makes a big difference. So it's important to have high expectations. And when you say, wow, so-and-so speaks 4 languages, we say, well, he must be good at math.
Well, and so thank you for that question, because it brought back what I was thinking earlier. Number one, this is a new thought though, but math is a universal language. So why not bring in math to help teach the language, right? Because now they're acclimating to the words that are being spoken in English, but they already know the math. They already have an understanding of numbers and, the concepts. So yeah, but my original thought that I had left for a while was around, like, we know that people who learn multiple language actually have a higher level of thinking in their brain. So I taught like kindergarten. I taught kindergarten, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. And you'll see these kids who are learning more than one language. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3 or 4, like you, Jim. And they're slower. They're slower at reading. They're slower at writing, because they're learning multiple languages at the same time. And so the processing takes longer, but in the end, they're a lot further ahead than those who are only learning one language. And for instance, I had an exchange student when I was in high school from Germany, and she lived with us for a year. She knew English so much better than I did, because for me, I just picked it up, right? It was just through acclimation, but she studied the language and she understood the ins and the outs of English, and she was teaching me stuff. So to kind of have that negative or that deficit view, or looking down on somebody for learning a language, is just ridiculous, because actually they're much farther ahead than the rest of us who aren't learning an extra language. So I just thought that was really interesting.
Right, I agree. And there's a lot of things I wanted to comment on there. And then one thing you said is about it's slower, and that's where the math comes in. There's always so much pressure, and kids saying, well, I'm not good at math. Why? Because I'm not quick at math. And really good mathematicians, successful mathematicians, are meticulous and slow, and they persevere. And so I don't know why we have these speed tests. They just create anxiety, and it's the opposite of SEL, I think, as well. So it's great, and I'm not real quick either. I think going back to that first question, but I persevere, and so I think that's a lot more important than being quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely, I don't know if solely American, but we value speed. And in other cultures, it's actually the opposite, that they value wow, like, look at how long you worked on that and you didn't give up, so I appreciate that.
Right. And Heidi, you said something about math being a universal language.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, Jen, do you know how your husband would count to 5 on his fingers? How do they do it in Turkey? Do you know? Does he start with his thumb?
I don't know. I think it may be different, but I know my son, who I don't think he's not bilingual, but definitely knows he has different cultures. He goes like 1, 2, 3, something really weird, but I think that's just a quirky thing of him.
Okay, sure.
When I was teaching kindergarten, we were asked to teach them with the thumb first,
Okay,
right? And we were asked to do it, or maybe we were asked to do it with the pinky. Maybe that's what it was. That's what it was. They wanted us to do it with the pinky and then go from there so that they could see the digit in, like the ones place and the tens place kind of thing.
right.
Or just moving on like that.
And we start with our index finger, which really doesn't make sense. Why would this be number 1? I asked an Uber driver when I was in Boston once, and I wish I hadn't because he started counting with his fingers instead of driving. But he took his hands off the wheel. But he said he started with his thumb as well. And I said, well, I start with my index finger. And he thought for a while. And he said, can I say this? He said, well, how do you give someone the middle finger? I'm like, what do you mean? And he thought, well, he knows what the middle finger is, the third finger, right? Because the thumb is the first finger. But if this is your first finger, then the middle finger would be between your third and your fourth finger, right? He was confused there. I said, well, how do you give someone the middle finger? Because if this is number 1, then where's 3? Where's your middle finger between these? Jen, do you want me to explain that?
No, you're just blowing my
Don't show her, Jim. This is a family show.
No, you're just blowing my mind because if you have your hand, why is this the first one?
Right. Because we never question. It's just because that's the way I was taught. So I'm going to teach you, but we never question our practices. We just do them because that's how we were taught.
Well, somebody's questioning it, and that's why they put it in that curriculum that I was teaching in that kindergarten class.
Sure.
And all the teachers were like, grumble, grumble. That's not how we do it. We start with the index finger. We had to unlearn, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess technically that is your first finger because your thumb isn't a finger.
Maybe.
Oh my gosh! Now you've got me. I'm having this existential crisis on digits. So
Right.
We're way off track.
And in Russia, they start with the open hand. And in Russia, and when they count to 5, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I forget where they start with their thumb or their pinky. But when they're finished, they have a fist, and we do the other way around. And then back to your question, Heidi, that we say that math is universal language, and parts of it are, but there's a lot of differences too. And when 80% of the teachers in the United States are white and often monolingual, then we're leaving the other kids that have different customs out a lot of times, and they're not part of this math discourse.
Yeah. So Jim, when I've been listening to you throughout this discussion here, I'm hearing a lot of things that you would like to see done differently, so that we include more cultures and not just a single culture. And that brings me to the next question of, like, if you were to, take an elevator ride to the top floor of a very tall building, and you could just have one person in that elevator with you that you could just blow their mind, who would that be, and what would you want to tell them?
Right. And so I said that about the emergent bilingual, but I've already told that story. So I think what I would do is with a teacher, and yo hablaría en español para decir, me gustaría que sepas que hay idiomas importa. Entonces no es una cuestión de matemáticas, depende mucho del idioma. And so I think I would teach a math lesson in Spanish. So they could get an idea of what it's like learning math in a second language.
So I hear, empathy.
Sure. Right. It's empathy, and it's also, to tell you the truth, right now, our emergent bilinguals are not doing well, but it's not them. They're capable. They know one language, and they're on their second or third or fourth language. So it's not them, it's us that aren't meeting their needs. So when we provide our students with access, then if anything, we should have higher expectations because they already know one language and learning another. So they're very, very capable. And typically what we do is we have lower expectations. So it's a combination of empathy, but also have high expectations for our students.
And I like this method of empathy, teaching through empathy for teachers, because I'm hearing more and more of that, even with like dyslexia, right? And we had a mom on not that long ago who's also a dyslexic herself, and then her children are dyslexic, and she helps a lot of people with that. And one thing that they had done at her school was they'd actually had the teachers go through a lesson from the perspective of a dyslexic student, and the teachers were like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that the way I'm teaching is affecting them like this.
Sure.
And so to do that with, you know, different culture, different language, like anything that separates us from the understanding of others and building that empathy is going to make us better teachers and have a better education system. Our students will come out at a much higher level because, like you said, they're very capable. It has nothing to do with their abilities. It has to do with what they're being offered.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Right. So when we change, our students will as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like SEL because SEL, if you change the letters around, it's ESL. But the first chapter of my book, I've got a book called Math for ELLs, as easy as uno los tres. And the first chapter is about the importance of having a math mindset. And that reminds me of SEL as well. The fact that math is not just numbers, there's culture involved as well. And so when we're inclusive and we consider Jim's needs, then he'll like math more. So it's really important to be culturally responsive, and that will make a difference also.
Well, what I love about this conversation is, you know, math. It's been a love-hate relationship with math. And I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. And maybe it's because it was the way it was taught. And, you know, I always, with my students, I say, I tend to think if you're strong in math, you may be a little weaker in language because of the different parts of the brain. And it's just one's very analytical, one's more expressive. And when I'm hearing you talk about math, you know, your fingers are your digits. And you learn numbers with digits. And then when you have an equation, it's also known as an expression, right? So there's a lot more language in math than I realize. And so I'm just wondering how you approach math to an emergent.
Okay, so the importance of using gestures is important. And so, for example, sometimes we can correct, if you will, someone's English when they're explaining themselves. But if I were to correct you, imagine you were learning Turkish, Jen, or maybe you know Turkish, I'm not sure, or Spanish. If I were to correct you all the time, after a while, you just shut down. So we have to be really careful. And so if we're talking about parallelogram and a student goes like this, then they're making that mathematical argument. So it's probably not the best time to well, that's parallelogram, right? Learn and listen to our students as they're explaining and making this deep mathematical argument. I think that's important.
Mm. Well, and like when we work with toddlers, we don't constantly correct a toddler. Right. A toddler might say, you know, I don't know, like for a spoon, they might say noon or something. And then you go, yeah, spoon. Right? Like sure. you just keep talking with the word that you want them to use, but you're not telling them, no, not noon, it's spoon. So right. Why not do that with, you know, learning another language as well? Yeah. And then the other thing that came up for me was like just remembering what it was like in my classroom with my 4th and 5th grade students, and then again at home with my own children, trying to talk about mathematical concepts. They often they have an understanding of what's happening, but they can't explain it because they don't have the language for it. And these are even people who are speaking English from birth, right? They don't have the language around it. So I spent a lot of time in 4th and 5th grade teaching mathematical language and how do we talk about our math, how do we explain our math? Because otherwise it's just, well, I put this over here and I do that over there, and you know, and even there was something, trying to remember what it was. There was one, I can't remember what it was. There was something where they said like, and then I know what it was. If they were like carrying, right? They were going to carry a number over, and they go, and then I just add it over here. And I'm like, well, you're not really adding it, you're carrying it over. Like, let's change that word. To you, it feels like you're just, you know, placing something over here, you're adding something over, but that's not the right word. So we have to find the right word to really explain what's happening. Otherwise it's messing us up, right? Or
Sure.
something like that. I don't remember exactly what the concept was that we were messing up on, but the word made sense to them in their head, but it wasn't actually what we were doing.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so, yeah, you're right. There is language in math. It's so important to develop language in math, as you were saying, Heidi. So that's chapter 3 of my book is developing language. We need to develop language. And a lot of times, going back to the Spanish, a lot of the terms are similar. Cognates, they're called. Parallelogram is very similar. We talk about parallelogram, it's very similar in Spanish. So if we can make that connection, it's a lot easier for our emergent bilinguals to make that connection. They don't have to learn what a parallelogram is. They know what a paralelogramo is. In Spanish, it's almost the same. So it's important. But just talking about math for me is boring. And I know, Jen, you said that you had like a love-hate relationship. I went to a conference once, and there was about 100 people in the conference, and we were all white, all speaking English, and we were just talking about fractions, and that bored me silly. On the other hand, I could go to a conference like TESOL or something like that. We were just talking about, you know, learning different languages. So that's where my passion is, not the combination of math and helping others.
Well,
the challenge I have is, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
No, please go.
The challenge I have is, like you, I teach a math education course, and most of my students who are future elementary teachers have had negative experiences in math, and they come in hating math. And a semester later, they're going to be a student teacher. They call them clinical teachers now, student teachers, and then they're going to have their own class. And so they're going to have, in Texas, 50% of their students are identified as Hispanic. 50% are Latinx students. So, and they hate math, and it's like, wow. So I have a lot to do in one semester. And so what they really need to do is to relearn, right, everything they've been taught, and to change that mindset. So one technique I did was, this was when we were face to face, and I said, you know what, I'm not a very good dancer. And then they talked about, oh yeah, you can do it. And I kind of went along with, yeah, but my mom's not a good dancer. Sorry, Mom. My dad doesn't really dance much. I just don't have that gene. This has got nothing to do with gene. Anyone can dance. Look. And they said, oh, and how about math? Can anyone do math? And like, oh, okay, you got me. And so what I used to do was to say, I'm going to take a risk, and you teach me how to dance before class started. And then you take a risk, and we can do math together. And so it was kind of funny because I got written up in the newspaper, and it said dancing professor, dancing math professor. And then, you know how you don't read the whole article, you just kind of look at the title. Someone said, oh, so do you teach music? I'm like, no. And like, everyone was asking if I was a music professor, and it was from that article. But no, I'm not. I'm a math education professor, not music education.
I love that. I love how you enlist your students to, you know, teach you and give them, I don't know, I don't want to say put you in a position where you're silly, but you're in a vulnerable spot, right? You make yourself vulnerable for them, and they make themselves vulnerable for you. And I've seen teachers, when they do that, they really make a deep connection with their students. My daughter had this one teacher that, like, she gave points for this game that they were playing, and it was an academic game, and the group that won the most got to have 3 wishes, any 3 wishes they wanted. And my daughter's group won that, and my daughter's wish was to have her teacher be the Cheez-It fairy. And she wrote up a script that the teacher had to say, and they made a costume for her, and they bought her some bags of Cheez-Its, and she had to run around throwing these Cheez-Its and telling everybody that they were her favorite and all this stuff. And the teacher totally did it, and we all got it on film, and she was like, you know, hey, they're vulnerable for me all the time, I'm going to be vulnerable for them.
Sure.
Awesome.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds like fun.
Very, very fun indeed. And um, with the numbers, I tell my students when I was growing up, I was not very good in math, but I still acquired a love of numbers and the relationships of numbers. And I think it's because the drill and kill, the way we were taught, I don't know if I was passive aggressive or what, but I was just like, I don't see the point in flashcards. I don't. But then there's so many people who love to slam the Singapore math in different ways. But when I'm looking at it, I was like, you know what? If I was taught this way, I think I would have latched on to it better. Like there's different ways to teach and there's different cultures and different approaches, and it's not a one size fits all. And so to see the relationships between numbers and the grouping and the pairing, and I'm just wondering your thoughts on all of that, how we are now, parents sometimes don't know how to teach their kids or support their kids at home, and how we could have parents support their kids with math at home.
By changing our mindset. For example, Jen, you are excellent at math, because in math, we need to explain things, and you're very good at explaining, and you've expressed yourself very, very well. And that's a skill, that's a math skill, and we need to know that in math. And so focus on assets, and the fact that you're so good at explaining means that you're good at math, and so you can do math. Plus, you like numbers, and so to answer your question, focusing on, and if you don't know, we'll say, well, I don't know. What do you think? Do less telling and more questions. So would be an advice that I would have. Just when I teach, also. It's about questioning, because when our students discover, then they'll retain it more. But if I just tell someone, then it gets boring and they shut down. And so it goes back to this mindset of SEL also. It's just a lot more fun to discover something for yourself. And so if you're a parent, then just question. So I don't know, what do you think? Wow, this is interesting. And really get involved with them, but not telling the answer doesn't work.
That's a theme in our lives, Jim. Jennifer and I keep hearing this. We know it too from our own experience, but we keep hearing it from different educators here and there to stop doing so much direct instruction and do more exploration and asking questions, which is right. How Jen and I like to function anyhow.
Right. And so you're spreading the word. So more and more educators know that, because I think it's so important. And I think we get in a lot of subjects, but still in math, we often teach the way we're taught. And
yes and no. So actually that leads me right into where I wanted to go. Nice segue. Jen was asking you about, how parents can help their students with math if they weren't taught this way. And I didn't have a good experience with math, in school either, until I got into college and I started taking courses for teachers, and I started learning conceptual math. Now I have to say I did okay in algebra, and I liked geometry because I wasn't having to memorize things, and it was more of me exploring and creating. But it wasn't until college that I was like, ooh, had I been taught this way, I wouldn't have struggled, But then I got into the classroom, no longer a student teacher. Now I have my own classroom, and I'm handed a curriculum model that doesn't do that. So how do we bring this conversations to schools that really helps them to understand how math and language and culture and all of that comes together, and not just the standard textbook that we're giving that's only monocultural?
Wow. First of all, close the door, keep that door closed. And that's what I used to do, because I was at a school and the principal wanted me to teach one way and I wanted to teach another way. And so I was lucky enough, I was kind of tall and there was this window, and I would close the door, and say, okay, let's do this. We're doing these fun games. And then when the principal came, I could see her walking down, and I knew she might be coming my direction. I said, okay, quickly, let's take out our books. And I didn't know, but
I gotta stop you right there for a second, Jim. I have been told so many times in my teaching career to close my door. And I'm a fighter, man. I'm like, no, this is something that needs to be seen and heard and spread. Yeah. So that's really where my question is going. Is like, instead of just closing my door, how do I get this to be the norm instead of me being the only one who's doing it, without anybody else knowing?
Right. And then I was saying, especially at the beginning, but because I work with pre-service teachers, and so at the beginning, close the door, but after a while, they get results. And once you get results, because this work, if you're passionate about math, and your students are going to be passionate about math, and they're going to do better on the test. And so students will do, doesn't mean we teach the test, but it's just a byproduct. And so when we're including our students, when we're caring, then our students are going to be happier, and they're going to do well on the test as well. In that case, you open the door and then spread the word.
So are you saying that you think this is more of a grassroots thing, like it has to start with the closed door teachers being successful, and then people going, well, what is it that you're doing? And then it will grow? Or do you think there's a way to make this more, math school system without starting at the bottom? Because as a consultant, as an education consultant, I left the classroom after I started teaching in '99, but I actually had only 12 years in the classroom because I stayed home with kids for a while. But of those 12 years, I got so burnt out and so frustrated being the grassroots person trying to get things to grow. And I really needed to be in a system where it was already happening from the overarching, system. So is it really only the grassroots way to get this going, or is there another way to make it more widespread so that these teachers aren't burning out and they're not, pushing against the grain so hard?
Right. And that's a difficult question, and I'm not sure I have the answer to that, Heidi, but I think it is important. I'm spreading the word. As I said, every book I write, every article I write, every time I give a presentation, if it's the principal to principal, is to yourself, to you, to my students, to everything. So I'm constantly, asking us to challenge. But if it were that easy, we would have made change, because I feel like we really haven't made changes, especially when it comes to math. It's been years and years and years. And our system's not working, let's face it. We're way behind other countries in math. And I think it's just because it's not fun. And we've got to make math fun and inclusive. I remember going into classrooms and observing. So I'm not sure, Heidi, I don't, that's a great question. I'm not sure if I have all the answers. I know I'm dedicated, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life to change the way we teach math, especially to our emergent bilinguals.
Maybe that's the answer, Jim, is that people like you and I and Jen and whoever else is out there that's passionate about this is continue to spread the word and continue to provide opportunities for people to empathetically feel that difference, right? Sure. And experience it themselves. Absolutely.
Right. So it won't work if I say, okay, well, Jim, you have to teach this way, or you have to teach that way. I think it's got to be stronger than that, because we all know that. But is it as strong enough if I tell you that? Does that mean you're going to do it? Or there's got to be some kind of reflection, I think, some kind of empathetic experience for someone to change.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm wondering. No, I'm sorry. I'm just wondering too, a lot of the conversations can be very one directional or very siloed, where when I was listening to you, Heidi, as a classroom teacher, who do you go to first is your building principal. But what does a building principal think of? Are they really spending much time thinking about math? But if you go to the supervisor, and if a whole bunch of teachers come together and say, we would love to present this to you. But is that going over your building, like the chain of command by going directly to the supervisor? Or if you go to the parents who are very passionate and vocal, and they're advocating for something that is being, done very successfully, or like Jim, like you made the newspaper because you danced with your kids. And if teachers were making more splash in the media for these positive things, and we had more strength-based, success stories. That's why I love having these types of conversations. How might we, as these champions, as these passionate people, start to reframe, flip the script, and elevate the conversation so we can get our vision manifested a lot sooner.
Sure, neat. For example, my vision, you talk about vision, and it's kind of off a little bit different angle, but what my vision is my children's book is coming out. And so I feel like our emergent bilinguals, because as I said, that's more my passion than math, although I use math as well. But emergent bilinguals, I feel like there's so many Latinx students who just aren't valued for who they are. Until once we have the vaccinations coming out soon, and once my books are coming out, I want to go from school to school and just have boxes of books and just knock on there and say, hey, obviously not, with permission first, but go into classrooms and read this book about Juan Jose, who's special, who's especial, and then hand out books to the kids, right? And it's even, I think it's important for our for those that don't speak Spanish as well. So certainly for the kids who do, they say, oh wow, I'm important, but also for the other kids who realize, oh wow, Juan Jose is important. He speaks 2 languages. And so that's what I like to do, go into kindergarten, first grade classes. So I guess it has to do with that vision of a passion also. And so when teachers see that, then they'll say, oh, wow, well, I'm going to start valuing language too. And I guess the same thing could be for math. When they see others really passionate about math, they say, well, maybe I should be more passionate about math too. And then my students would be passionate about it.
Mm. Thank you. And so, talking about passion, and we're all very passionate, and we've been asking you a lot of questions. We're wondering what type of questions, knowing that we do, educational consulting and doing these conversations and our passions a little bit. What question do you have that you would like to ask us?
Just more about your successes. What works for you. I've talked about my life and what I'm passionate about. What works for you? What are you passionate about?
Heidi, do you want to go first, or?
Sure. I always get nervous when I know this question's coming up, because I'm like, I have no idea what they're going to ask me. Yeah, I guess my successes are more personal successes. I didn't grow up, well, I don't know if I grew up with a lot of SEL or not. I have, I have 2 parents, but I also have so many family friends and neighbors that raised me as well, right? Because I was in their households and watching them and how they interact with one another. So, I have a huge family in that sense. So I wasn't raised just by my own parents. However, I'm a very emotional person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And in my family of origin, there wasn't a lot of examples of how to deal with those emotions. And part of that's just the generation that my parents were raised in, and the generation of my grandparents, and my parents did the best they could with what they knew, and they did better than their parents. And I needed a lot more than that. So I spent a good portion of my adulthood learning social emotional skills for myself. And I became very passionate about doing that in the classroom. And that's actually why I became a teacher. Like you, I'm not like you're, math is just a vehicle for you to get to what you want to do. And for me, teaching all the academics was a vehicle for me to get to the SEL. And I feel like you can't do the academics without the SEL. So that's why I became a teacher. I can get all nerdy around some of the subject matter too, but SEL is always kind of behind everything I'm doing. And so my biggest successes are when I see it pay off in my classroom, when I see my students on their own using the skill sets that I've taught them. I hear conversations that they're having and they're actually working out problems together in a respectful manner, and with me hands off. But I know I put a ton of effort into making that happen. I put a ton of effort into teaching them how to empathize, how to listen to each other, how to know themselves and their own boundaries, how to speak out about what they're thinking and feeling in a respectful way. I mean, I put a lot of effort into this, and when I see them actually do it, it's amazing. And then my own children as well. When I hear my own children talk and they say something that's like, wow, how'd you get to be so wise? And then I realize I supported that. I mean, they're doing it on their own, but I provided opportunities for them to learn that. And through a lot of the discussions that we've had, we're learning a lot. Right now, this is something I've been wanting to post on Facebook, but I just moved over, I guess it was in May that I moved in the middle of this pandemic, and I moved away from a place that I was born. And I mean, I have friends since birth, and my parents are still there, whom I speak to on a daily basis. Like, we're very close. And they see my kids, their grandkids, you know, a couple times a week. And I've literally uprooted myself and my children who were born there and moved out of state. And that is quite devastating, actually. But if you look at my Facebook posts, you'll see a really dreamy life, because we have this amazing house that we could not ever have in the Bay Area of California, because the expenses were just outrageous there. You know, and it's been my husband's dream to move here for 17 years. So I decided, if he's going to have his dream, well, we are all going to have our dreams too. So my kids, they've always wanted a trampoline, and we had room for trampoline. We got them a trampoline. You know, they designed their rooms the way they want it. We got ourselves a dog. We've been waiting for a dog forever. I mean, it sounds very dreamy, and it is, because that's part of our resilience. Because we know there's things we can be appreciative of and we can have gratitude for. We have not forgotten the devastation that's there also. And we still talk about that, and we process it, and we work through it, because sometimes that comes in waves. And when that comes, then we know we have the positive things to turn to. So watching my kids do this brings me so much pride and joy to know that they have these skill sets. They're being raised with these skill sets, and they're being given opportunities to use them. Now, I'm not protecting them so much. I mean, a little bit, but not so much that they don't get to try it out for themselves. So that's where my proudest moments come from.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Jen?
Well, and I just wanted to say, you know, I really wanted to appreciate your openness and honesty and vulnerability and sharing that, Heidi. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I agree.
For me, I guess I always kind of felt that I was that teacher that if somebody else taught the class, most of the kids would be fine. But it was like that, you know, one or two kids who were kind of like me growing up, you know, the awkward, under the radar, kind of misunderstood, because I tractor beam towards them, because that's how I am. And so, you know, every year there might be that like one or two kid. I'm like, that's why I'm here. Right. I was the out of the box one, kind of still even misunderstood as a teacher. I felt sometimes, because, you know, just give us the rubric, let's check off the boxes. I'm like, no, but I want you to like come alive. And it was just, I was making myself miserable, like trying to do these super creative lessons that, you know, kids just wanted to do their stuff and move on. But it was that one kid who really needed the opportunity to express themselves. Well, with COVID, you said about closing your door. Well, you know, I'm not even in the building. Right. So I'm just, and everyone's scrambling, and I'm like, this is my playground. Like, I'm just making this stuff up, you know, oh, I can do this and pulling. And a lot of people are struggling to pivot. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be student centered. I'm going to give options. I'm going to build relationships. I'm compacting the curriculum. And just as long as they get the essentials, and, you know, just I can hide and just do whatever I want. And I did an end of the marking period self-eval and asking strength-based questions like, you know, what was your proudest moment in this class? What contributed to that? And, you know, it's like discovering my passion, knowing what I want to do with my life now. What was the contributing factor? You, this class. And I was like, it's not just the 2 or 3 now. It's like most of my students that are saying, because of your class, I feel like I've been better off now. And so not that I need that validation, but it feels really good. And so it's leaning into, like Heidi, that SEL and building the relationships, and to say, well, we really need to go back to school because we need that social connection. You know what? I have felt closer to these students behind the screen in faster, because maybe this is not how we grew up, but that's how they grew up. Like, they are used to connecting behind the screen. They're used to having their virtual friends are their real friends. The kids who are doing their is it Twitch, right? Like, they're live streaming and they're playing their games and having conversations with other people from across the country, and like, they're good at this. And so that has been very exciting. And I don't think it's by accident that, through doing work with Frank Cross and people like you, Jim, creating this tribe of like-minded people where now, like, there's a stage for this. And so I'm really looking forward to, what's going to happen in the next year or two. And if we can start collecting all this strength-based data and start presenting it to these people, like that is what is really getting me excited, is if we gain some momentum and gain a following and support each other, where can we take this in the next couple of years?
Great. Thank you so much. It's
I
been
teared
nice
up when you were, sorry, Jim.
both of you as well.
Yeah, I teared up when you were talking, Jen, when you said that the kids' response of how you made a difference for them. I mean, I'm not even in the classroom, but to hear that another teacher hears that is like so powerful that it made me tear up.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I was being a little, the question that you ask will dictate the answer that you get. So, I kind of not skewed it, but I gave them that opportunity to reflect about my class. And, if you ask a positive question, you'll get a positive answer. So, but thank you for that.
That's great. So Jim, we're about ready to wrap it up. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. And before we go, we'd like to know how our viewers could find you if they have more questions about, bringing in culture to their classroom. So what's the best way for them to find you and your work?
The easiest way is to Google math ELLs with a space in between, and they'll see my website. Ewinglearning.com is my website, and I'm going to update my website. Just a heads up, that's one of my projects. I don't know about Thanksgiving or maybe a Christmas holiday, so I will be updating that soon. But yeah, just Google math ELLs, and you'll see Ewinglearning.com.
Okay, and when we post this on our YouTube channel, we'll put that URL address in there as well under our description.
Thank you. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing your updated website.
Thank you.
And your book. And your book. I can't wait to see your book.
Sure, the two go together, right? So when the book comes out, I'll update my website. So, and also what I'm going to do for to promote a little bit is have a coloring book. And so you can if you come to my website, you can get a free coloring book.
Awesome.
Right. About to color in the characters of Juan Jose.
Awesome.
Enchiladas verdes.
And you can color him any color you want, I bet.
Of course, sure.
If you want him to be purple, he can be purple.
Sure.
All right, so as we close out, Jen likes to take a screenshot, and I'm not sure if we all have mugs, but we'll hold up our glass and do a cheers for the holiday and whatnot, either way.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Okay, got it.
And Jen, you can hold yours up either way so that when we get to the, yeah, there we go. When we get to the YouTube thumbnail, I can grab it.
All right.
Well, muchas gracias, Jim. I really appreciate you being here.
Muchas gracias a ustedes.
Thank you.
Thank you.